There we go. Hello, hello.
Hey, Robert, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. This
Good.
is this film that we're going to talk about today. Really, I'm kind of happy I stumbled upon it, and I stumbled upon it in a very kind of happenstance kind of way. It was just a preview, I think, on a DVD I was watching. I said, "That looks like a really good film. It looks interesting." And the film that we're going to talk about is, of course, Force Majeure from 2014. And do we want to give our kind of our rating at the beginning here this time? We always seem to wait till the end, and then and
Sure,
maybe
if
it
that's
might
what
be
you'd like to
interesting to,
do.
yeah, maybe let's just try it out this way, and let's give sort of a, we can go with my home run, single, double, triple, out uh, scale, which I kind of like. Do you want to go first? What did you think of the film?
Sure. Well, I I liked the film,
Hmm.
um, but I would split it into two categories for me. I would because we tend to focus on cinematography in previous conversations and the beauty of the way the visuals are crafted, and then the story itself. So visually, I'd probably give this a home run
Yeah,
visually, because
it's
I
beautiful.
think it's quite stunning
Yeah.
how they've created the angles of the of the the different visuals within and without mountainside and within structures, right? So I thought
Hmm.
that was quite nice. But I'd give it a triple, I think, for the story, and because it was, I don't know if it was too busy, right? If there was too many things going on,
Wow.
and um it was a complicated, um well, it's a relationship story, so it was a
Yeah.
complicated story, and I thought there was just a lot of stuff there that I found a little monotonous at times.
It did have that sort of Swedish, I hate to classify it that way, but it had sort of a Swedish, what's the slow pace? Or maybe not called slow pace, just a pace, a very measured pace. And
Mm,
it seemed to, again, I think I wrote to you that I've been watching lots of Bergman films.
mm,
I don't know if you've watched much Ingmar Bergman. I haven't seen everything he's ever done, but I've been watching quite a bit of his films because we have the Criterion channel now on our
mhm.
Apple TV. That's a plug for Apple TV sponsor. Thank you. And so uh, the films I've watched, I've really enjoyed, but they just kind of reset your mind in a way because
Mm.
they're a whole different thing, and you're reading subtitles. Which this is a subtitled film, which you know makes it a little bit slower, but it was it had a different pace. What did you feel about the pacing? Was it
Yeah, I
too
think
slow and you thought it was monotonous? No, you felt it was busy, not
no, I thought
monotonous.
the things that were happening, the different overlapping kind of relationships, and
Hmm.
the different kind of moments that they were kind of dealing with. I thought that was quite busy. There was a lot of stuff being squeezed into these different scenes, and I thought that there were some things that kind of distracted or took away from the overall flow of the story. Now maybe that's pace, um, but I thought the word that pops into my head all the time is mundane, and I use the term monotonous, but because it's relationship, you know,
Yeah.
story, and it wasn't the typical Hollywood style where
No.
there's all the standard story arc where there's a denouement afterwards where everyone feels happy and resolved, and the world is righted. There was, of course, some of that,
Mhm.
but the story focused on what life was like, all of its messy glory. And
Yeah.
um, and why I say it got busy is because it had a lot of overlapping and well, like life, you have a lot of things that just kind of intrude and get in the way. And for a movie, I wanted it to be a bit more escapist.
Right.
So you don't have as much of a reminder of what, the sloppiness of your own life.
That's a good point. This was not an escapist film at all. Let me put the I felt it was about a triple too, but I'm so on the fence about giving it a home run. And the main question, let me put the screen up if I can do that. The film we're talking about is called Force Majeure, and it was directed by Ruben Östlund, has those umlauts over there, Östlund. And I forgot what I was talking about, but I kind of am pretty happy that I stumbled on this film because it's really led me, I think, to where I want to be, and I think it's probably where any follower of film should be. It's really introducing a new director who is, in some ways, maybe one of the best directors out there now. And that's what I didn't know that at first. I didn't know that until after I watched the film and did some research about the director. Did you hear about the director, Ruben
No.
Östlund? Okay. He, on his most recently released film, he won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. He won the Palme d'Or is the big prize that goes out yearly at the actually the Cannes Film Festival. I said Cannes, at the Cannes Film Festival. And I that's not really on my radar all the time. I think
Right.
Did you watch Parasite? Have you seen Parasite?
So it's one of the movies that's on my list, but I
Yeah,
haven't made a time. But that could be our next kind of endeavor.
it could be. I believe that director, his name is what's his name? Bong Joon-ho.
Hmm.
I think his film Parasite won the Palme d'Or maybe the year before. So this fellow's newest film, I'll put it up, called The Square. This
Hmm.
is the film he's made just after Force Majeure won the Palme d'Or, which
Hmm.
is pretty incredible. I mean, that's a major accomplishment. Uh, I'm not an expert in the history of the awards they've given out there, and I took a glance at the winners of the past. Uh, but I really feel like our talks and this discussion we're having has led me to kind of get more focused on this award because it really, really, uh, it's probably in some ways more significant than the Oscars. Or what do you think? Do you feel it's a
I, again,
what's
I
your
don't know
take?
anything about the director.
Yeah,
I do know that in terms of awards, Oscars are American centric, and
yeah,
they tend to celebrate, or they have tended to celebrate a certain type of movie, and it's very um, the awards and the style of what they're kind of rewarding. um, it's fine, but it's you know generically American. But
yeah.
the other film festivals around the world, right? TIFF in Toronto, Cannes,
Mm,
film festivals, they tend to reward or look for um, stories that are a little bit more creative and stylistic, and they're looking for other kinds of factors. So if this director is winning awards more than once, I would imagine that that says something about his
yeah.
creative abilities.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, exactly. American awards are more based on box office sometimes, and that's been the contention for years. And that was why when Parasite won the Academy Awards,
Mm,
it was big news,
right.
because I don't I don't know if he's the first foreign director to win. He can't be the first, but he's certainly the first Korean or Asian director to have won the Best Picture award. But other festivals, and I don't know the TIFF. I'll have to look into that. I've jotted that down. Uh, but I know Cannes is, it's much more geared towards artistic achievement rather than box office and commercial success.
Right.
Uh,
It's storytelling. It's
yeah,
how all the different features come together to tell,
yeah,
a very unique or a very significant story. Even if it tends to be mundane, it's how all the pieces come together.
right. So you must watch this film. All of our viewers must watch this film. I think it's on Netflix or Amazon or something. I found it. Incredible film. And the main thing about the film that we're going to talk about today, Force Majeure, is
Mm,
kind of as I was watching it, the question I wrote down in my notes here, I kept asking myself, is this movie as good as I think it is? And I couldn't be certain. I don't know why I was hesitant to admit how wonderful it was, but I think I did realize it by the end. That scene on the bus at the end, which we'll get to me kind of sealed it in terms of that he knew what he was doing.
mm.
To me, that resolution was, I don't know if it was perfect, but it was a resolution, and it made sense within the context of the film. Uh, so let's talk about the movie a little bit. It's a film about this family, and it's definitely a relationship film, and it's about a family unit that is on vacation.
Mm.
And when people are on vacation, I was struck by how it's kind of like a time to reinvent yourself, because you're going somewhere new, you're meeting new people, and it's almost time to say, hey, this is who I am. It's like a mini little life you can live in the span of this vacation time, where you can be someone else. And this family undergoes, I think, a big change as a family unit. Maybe not in dramatic standards. It's a very internal film in a lot of ways, but I think it's very well done. So that was my take. It's kind of a family film, a relationship between family members. Let's go on.
Yeah, that's it. It's can we go back to the
Yeah,
first picture again?
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a good way of describing the film, that it's a journey for the family.
mhm,
The things they're overcoming, the mountain they're climbing, or the hurdle they're
mhm,
getting over. And maybe that's the purpose of the setting of the film,
mhm,
right? Right, the snowy mountains, and the 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 way that they are on vacation, and being together on the mountain, maybe is symbolic of the relationships and the kinds of the kinds of experiences that they've, or the way they've defined their relationships in the past. And this is about exposing that excuse me, and watching that transition to something new. This
yeah,
when the movie opened, in this first shot where they're on the mountain together, and they're happy and they're excited to be there, and the photographer starts to stage them. you
yes,
know I thought that really looked awkward. It looked like they were
yes,
there together, but leading almost in parallel, right? They weren't there to play necessarily together. They were there together, but their experiences were not together. Does that make sense?
it does. It's, to me, that scene, for me, it told about, it was almost like the intrusion of a camera in
Mm,
people's lives, and how you have to straighten up, smile, lean your head in, turn this way. No, kids,
Uh,
mom, put your hand on the back. And it was very artificial. And it made you think about, okay, when the photographer was gone, oh, now we can be ourselves again.
right.
And that was like, that's very key in this director, Ruben Ostlund, in his next film, the film The Square. The main character is a museum director,
So
and it's all about showing things as art
yeah,
and the
staging things.
staging, and the whole film is based around his life, and it blurs these lines between art and real life, which to me, this scene encapsulated. It was kind of like you bring a camera in and people change, take the camera away and people are themselves. But
Who are they when when no one's watching?
yes, which
Right.
is, the privileged moment,
Mm,
in acting and all that kind of thing. So that from the get-go, I was scratching my head. Is this as good? Does he really know what he's doing?
mm,
And he does. I believe he really does know what he's doing. So it was set in this idyllic snowscape, and
mm.
the scene of the avalanche was the first thing that happened. And the avalanche, which is kind of how would you put that in dramatic terms? What was the avalanche itself? Was that the critical moment? It was the catalyst.
Catalyst. Yeah,
It
the
was a
catalyst.
catalyst and he emphasized these shots. And I don't know much about skiing resorts, but maybe this is a real thing where they blast off these sounded like gunshots to trigger avalanches for the safety of the skiers. Is that something you're aware of? I've never
Yeah,
heard
I
of
think
this.
I'm not. This is how they're doing it there. In Canada and stuff, they go off into the mountain. They drop things from helicopters, and
Oh,
they try to make the hill or the mountainside more safe
hmm.
by making the snow shift on their schedule.
Hmm.
And what I liked about these moments was that they served a dual purpose, not just to tell about the setting of the story and kind of the backdrop of the story and what the reality of their vacation world is going to be, but rather um, the significance was that these were like the warning shots,
Yeah.
the signals that something is impending, something is coming.
Yeah. It was
They're
like the
trying to
starting
start
starting
something.
gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting the way he used it. Beautiful photography. This is the family asleep,
And they're all in similar colors.
and they're all in similar colors. And I felt it was kind of telling too that they were asleep. It was kind of like they were going to be woken up
Mhm.
into this thing. And this is before the avalanche.
Right.
I wonder if people who watch our channel know that we have lots of spoilers.
Well, I'm sure they'll figure it out.
I think they'll figure it out. We do a lot of spoilers. And then there were everyday scenes of them brushing their teeth in this bathroom.
This was an interesting. I like that they returned to this shot many times,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Because it isn't just excuse me,
Mhm.
it isn't just seeing them doing this daily mundane kind of thing, but it's looking at their reflection as they're doing it.
Yeah,
So they were seeing themselves, and we saw how they were looking at each other as they were doing these daily tasks. I thought this was an interesting shot because we see almost like the mental change and shifts,
mhm.
right? As the film goes on.
Just from a photographic standpoint, I've seen this technique or thing done in quite a few films where they look into a mirror and then you don't see the reflection of the camera. So technically, although this didn't seem like a big special effects film, I don't think there's a film out there today that doesn't have some computer graphics. How did he do this? Which just,
Right.
I think I saw another film recently and I can't remember what it was. But they actually had another actor in the foreground and a fake frame, a fake mirror, and a real actor on the other side. And the real star was on the other reflected side, but there was a double in the foreground. So they were actually like doing a mime thing.
Right.
But that was, I think, a
Fake
film
mirror,
from the
fake reflection.
70s or the 80s, before technological advances could help us see a shot like this, which is almost an impossible shot, right?
I think I mean I would imagine that the blemish that we see in the mirror,
Mm-hmm.
that squared blemish there,
Yeah.
that's the
The camera
location
hole.
of the camera.
Ah,
And they've digitally gone on and just masked it with that, because the camera never moves from this spot,
yeah.
right? So I don't think it would be too difficult to just plop on
One
um,
tile, maybe. What
one
I think,
tile, just
yeah. Take it
right, just
out, shoot it that way, and then pop it back in again.
then digitally just over superimpose that
Yeah.
little spot.
Interesting. Then the big scene of the, I don't like the fact that it says force majeure at the top there. Sorry.
It's
But
okay.
but it says the son said this doesn't look controlled to me, daddy. And the child was screaming. This was the big catalyst scene, the moment when the avalanche was happening.
Yeah.
And I thought, from the previews, I thought this was going to be a disaster film
Hmm.
where trapped under the snow, the family struggling to get out, But this was a different kind of disaster that happened. It was a disaster of a crisis of confidence sort of thing. I don't know what genre this falls under. His films, let's go to the next one. His films are kind of their own genre unto themselves in a way. I think they're highly symbolic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I noticed that in the next film he makes, The Square. He uses symbolism very cleverly, very smart, in a very smart way. But what did you make of this avalanche scene? They put this high impact scene right at the beginning, and then this kind of the reverberations of this scene echoed throughout the rest of the entire film, I felt.
Yeah, I think from a visual standpoint, it's quite stunning.
Mm-hmm.
And from the symbolic standpoint, you talk about the family being buried under the snow, and the whole journey is about digging them out. I think that's what I think that the imagery here is. It's about creating this faux this metaphor, right? They are buried beneath the snow. The family is not truly understanding of who they are, and they're moving through life perhaps in a very safe way, right? They're encased, and they have to get out of that kind of situation they've created for themselves. And as this scene moves on, right, you see everyone runs and does their whole thing, except visually what happens is it becomes a whiteout. They are lost in the fog. You can't see. And that
Yeah.
imagery pops in later in the film as well. But this idea of being encased or being enveloped and not having a clear view of how to get out is the metaphor of the story, because they see that the family sees that they're in trouble. They don't know how to move forward, right? They're stumbling around blind, and I think the director and the cinematographer do a really great job of of making sure that we as the audience get that message, that we understand what it is that is going on for this family.
What I wrote down in my notes is that I felt that the film, and this is the pivotal scene, it sort of hits the reset button on this family. And they have to, after this event, they have to reconfigure. And they're a family. The way I look at family is that, and I think John Bradshaw, I don't know if you know John Bradshaw, but he's a famous person that talked about family structures and dysfunctional families and things like that. That if anything in this, a family is like a mobile that hangs and they're all connected by strings hanging together. And if one part of that mobile moves, the rest of the family moves too. You know
Right.
what I mean? And certainly the father is the one who undergoes this change the most, but the wife's confidence in her husband also figures into it. They're sort of family dynamic. The whole family gets shaken up. And the son was agitated, and so was the daughter. But that reset is what they have to come out of. And it was kind of interesting the way, for normal people, I think if you were witnessing this, it might be something that you would just sort of, okay, that was an awkward moment. I'm better now. But for this family, it just sort of opened wounds or opened issues that had maybe been covered before. And they couldn't let it go,
Right.
which was admirable. It's sort of like, let's deal with this now. This thing that just happened to us is affecting all of us. Let's all admit to it, talk it out, make it better. Let's heal. And I think it was a kind of, again, a film of healing. Let's go on. This is after the avalanche, and I think they did a day of skiing after that. But they came back exhausted, and the kids were distant, removed, kind of angry. The mother and father couldn't get through to them. And it was like this unspoken, what is it? An unspoken disagreement that they couldn't resolve. Did you tap into that at all?
Yeah. So the avoidance that the kids have in this scene, right? They just don't want to deal with the parents, but
Right.
at the same time, they're reacting to how the parents dealt with them when they were coming back to the room.
Right.
They were forced into this space, told they had to be in there. And it was interesting that the filmmaker, the story had the cleaner in the room.
Yeah.
The cleaner entered.
I have a picture of him.
Yeah.
Him. Yeah.
And it was almost like a reminder that even though we're watching the film and we're watching what's going on, that they are being, the characters in the story are being watched. And there's always kind of like an external viewpoint, an external observer, right?
Yeah.
About
Yeah.
what's going on. And the kids are thrust into that environment, in the room where the cleaner was, right? And
Mhm.
they didn't know who he was, and he didn't know them, but they had to be there. It's almost like the authors or the writer and the filmmaker was reminding us that the kids were going to be bearing some of the brunt of the issues that the family was having.
Mhm.
And they were going to be going through some of their own kind of uncomfortable moments, but separate from the family, separate from the parents. And they were going to be observed as they were going through that. It was kind of just a reminder of that kind of truth as the mom and dad were dealing with whatever they had to deal with. And then, of course, when the parents come back and they want to treat it like everything's fine, the kids are like, they're just trying to process what happened and they didn't want to deal with it.
Mhm.
in that moment, which I thought was kind of also quite telling about the relationship of the family.
I think it's natural. Let's go back to this one shot. I think it's natural for adults to try to put on a happy face or paint over, gloss over difficult situations for the sake of their children.
Mm,
Uh, but I think this film sort of points in the opposite direction, that you've got to just, you know, as teachers, as people who've worked with kids, when there's something that happens at a school or any environment with children, it's better just to talk about it, you know, in some way, or address it in some way, maybe not talk about it.
well, that's what moments like this, um, which happen many times in the story,
Hmm.
seem to be pointing to. Mom and dad
Yeah.
are trying to have a conversation, and initially they don't want to, right? They're 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 still trying to gloss things over.
Hmm.
And this speaks, even the language here, right? I didn't recognize you, I don't recognize you or myself. That speaks to
Hmm.
identity, and who
Yeah.
are they collectively as a family, who are mom and dad collectively as the parent unit, who are the
Yeah.
kids collectively as the kids, but then who are they individually,
Yeah.
right? That's what kind of like is the renorming.
Right.
It's almost like the avalanche, the whole, them becoming overwhelmed by the cloud or the fog of the avalanche. They
Hmm.
become encased in it, and they're trying to break out like it's a cocoon, like they're trying to, the previous existence, they're trying to renorm, as you've used, right?
Hmm.
This identity of who they are
Yeah.
collectively.
Let me go back. We talked about that. So these scenes out in the hallway were interesting. They did quite a few of them where they could finally, it was funny how they had to go into a public space
Mm,
to have a private discussion quite
right,
frequently. They couldn't have their discussions in the room with the kids, keep those
right.
discussions away, which is again a bit of this kind of adult concealment of truth from children, which was interesting. And this observer, he was always so, he just seemed so creepy and so non just lacking of any emotion. He was just watching it like a very voyeuristic. I guess it's a voyeurism kind of, the film is voyeurism sort of take. That's something that's been written quite a bit. And you think about films like Hitchcock's Rear Window, which do you know that film?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jimmy Stewart is sort of playing out these voyeuristic fantasies or flights of imagination, and so it's something that I'm sure he's considering, that voyeurism filmmaking.
Well, it's interesting when you first see this character. He's the cleaner who's in the room with the kids when the
Hmm.
parents push the kids into the room and they say, someone's in here, and the parents don't listen.
Yeah.
But after this, there's only one other moment when he actually gets involved with the parents. Um, every other moment, he's off at the distance, right?
Right.
So it's almost like this is saying that most of the time you're just going to have impartial observers of who you are at a distance. And they're not going to get involved unless they need to get involved in some way,
Hmm.
which is just again what life is like. You'll have people kind of watching you at a distance, and if they pay attention to you at all, right, it's only from an impartial perspective. So
Hmm.
it was really clever how the filmmaker created these layers of truth to what relationship and the the dynamics that we have with those around us, right?
Hmm.
Both the people that we consider to be part of our intimate immediate circle, and then a larger circle, and then the world beyond. I think it's just really, really lovely.
Yeah.
And then of course the parents yelling to this guy, we want a private time, but they're in a public space,
Yeah.
right? So they're completely deluded of the point of the of them being what they're experiencing even though it's a private moment, they don't get that they have no control over the way it's perceived by the people
Yeah.
around them, right? It was really quite fascinating.
Yes, that's a
And
theme. That's a theme of this director. He's
can
very
we go back?
conscious.
Can we go back to the other picture with yes,
This one?
um,
Okay, yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
One of the things I loved about this shot was the pattern work, and of course it's location, right? So
Mhm.
but the guy had the filmmaker had the cinematographer had a lot of different possibilities of how to stage this. If you lower it, put the camera on their side of the hotel, looking
Mhm.
up at the observer, right? The observer becomes at a distance, and we're seeing it from the parents' perspective. Here we're seeing it from the observer's perspective, right? So in
Yeah.
essence, we become the voyeurs
Yeah.
in this moment,
Mhm.
which I think is quite interesting. But I like this because this floor, look at the angles and all the lines, very
Yeah.
linear,
Yeah.
right? And even the carpet, right? It's kind of segmented in this linear pattern, this gradation pattern, right? And it implies movement. It implies like a ladder. It implies like they're at one point on this ladder and
Mhm.
they're stuck in this place. I love the way it implied a journey without actually saying they're on this journey.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but
Yeah.
it really supports the image. It really supports what I think the film is really about.
One thing that strikes me about this shot is the costumes. I mean, the
Yeah,
father's in his underpants, basically an old t-shirt. She's in just some sweats and a t-shirt. It's kind of intimate clothing you wouldn't necessarily wear in public, but they step out in the hallway that way, which is sort of like if you're in a hotel, sometimes you might see a guest at the hotel walk down the hallway in their bathrobe,
right.
you know, and
Right.
it just seems that you wouldn't normally walk in public in a bathrobe, but because we're in a hotel, there's a different code. And seeing a strange man or woman walking down the hallway in a bathrobe is sort of like okay in a hotel setting. And there's that kind of a blurring of, public and private in a hotel setting. Kind of interesting.
It would be very different if they were still clothed in their ski gear
Oh
or
yeah.
in pants. Right here, this way, it looks like they've stripped away some things. They've been
Yeah.
become a little more exposed.
They're vulnerable for sure.
Yeah, much
Yeah.
more.
So let's go ahead. This character I found interesting, and she was the woman that the wife bumps into at the checkout or one of the check-in tables at the hotel, and they started talking about their lives. And this woman was a little bit more of a free spirit, perhaps less rigid in her lifestyle. She was the one, I don't know if you remember the scene, but she was talking to the wife about, oh, I left my children. This vacation is about me getting away from my kids. I would never bring my kids on this trip. And then she also reveals that she has casual affairs uh, with uh, she had, I think, two different affairs when she was there, and the mother was kind of talking to her like, "How can you be like this? What? I mean,
Right.
it was like two totally different opposing views of life butting up against each other. But at the end of the movie, this woman, I don't know if you realize, she was the one who stays on the bus.
Yeah.
Did you remember that?
Yep.
And I thought that was a telling thing. It sort of spoke, and I don't know the symbolism of the bus. That's still kind of an enigma to me. I haven't really cracked that yet. But the enigma of that inept bus driver who just couldn't get around those hills and what happened after that. She was the woman who stayed on the bus with that crazy bus driver, which I thought was kind of interesting. This is uh, this is when the wife reveals her version of the story to
Yeah.
the couple they have over for dinner.
A friend, isn't it? Like
I
isn't
think that, yeah, they're friends they met up with. Like, right. Yeah.
the
And it
two
was kind
men.
of interesting how this is when the wife had one recollection of the events and the husband had a different recollection, or he was unable to face what really happened. He had to go into some kind of denial mode to justify his behavior and his actions. He
Yeah,
couldn't live with himself. It was very,
they actually had two conversations, right?
I think they
So
had one before this. Yeah.
with the woman who was a little more free in her, you know, her definition of what her responsibilities were as a wife and as a
Mhm.
mother,
Yeah.
right, in their relationship. um that first one, he was in complete denial, and he actually
Yeah.
accused the wife of not you know, of her being stressed, and that's what caused her to misunderstand or miss. So
Mhm.
he was shifting a lot of the he was basically accusing her of making something up because of
Mhm.
her, you know, her anxieties or whatever, which didn't help with how the wife was how she was able to manage
Mhm.
and cope with the stress. This part of it, it's all shifted to him because, I mean, she literally has evidence and proof of what is going on,
Yes.
and
I
he's forced to confront that truth.
I didn't put the shot of that in, but they do look together at the telephone, the iPhone
Yeah,
sort of video of the event, and they get confirmation that of what the wife was saying was absolutely correct. Isn't that sort of how it played out? Yeah.
and then you can see how he's in this scene. He just shuts down, and he's
Yeah.
become smaller, and you know, it's like he's being forced to confront that part of himself, you
Mm.
know. And
This is when I thought, sorry to interrupt. This is when I thought the film was about, I thought it was kind of a feminist film in a way, kind of a how the male ego, the links to which the male ego goes to protect itself from mistakes or whatever, just certain male ego. I felt like, wow, is this an anti-man film or, down with the
it
patriarchy?
it could have taken that, it could have taken that turn, right? It
Yeah.
would have made it a lot, it would have made it much more uh, narrow in its focus, narrow in its scope,
Hmm.
right? Tell it only from one perspective. But if
Hmm.
this is truly about the family, then every character's identity has to be explored,
Right.
right, in the family. And they do that, but the kids are kind of lumped together to a
Yeah.
great extent.
This is the couple. I don't know how long we want to talk about them, but this is the couple that they talked to. And it was even like the aftermath of this discussion between the other couple, the husband and wife. It sort of has reverberations in their relationship, and
Right.
they talk about issues of trust and responsibility, and
Yeah.
kind of do a quick identity check between the two of them, which was kind of interesting. It focused on these two.
Yeah. You see, this is where it started to get muddy for me,
Mm,
where it starts getting cluttered. So the
yeah.
first couple, right? Maybe it was meant to be, the first couple was the woman and her, you know, the guy she ran into
Hmm.
on the mountainside. This is this unfamiliar couple that was known through the wife's connection. This
Hmm.
is the couple known through the husband's connection, right? And I I, I get that this was about seeing the ripples, but the first conversation was just like the wife was venting about something and explaining an experience. And then this second conversation was the same thing. They were kind of peeling off the band-aid and letting the wound get some air. And
Yeah.
but I didn't understand. Well, I mean, I get it. I get what they were trying to do from a story perspective,
Yeah.
right? But I just I found that this and relationship and how they pursued this relationship afterwards
Hmm.
that was what made it messy for me. That's what made it
Yeah,
cluttered.
it was like it was a side story or a subplot or it was a little bit of a detour away from the main
Yeah.
storyline,
And I thought it
which,
was extraneous. I didn't think it was a
yeah, yeah,
necessary element to the story.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I see some parts where they had to do it again to have that moment of revelation that happens when you're with another person telling a story about your life. And they needed that as a story construct to kind of propel things. But they did go on quite a bit with this couple's own personal story.
Yeah.
But they were a couple that where I think it comes out that he was a uh, maybe a separated father who had kids that he wasn't there with, and he was there with his girlfriend. I think she was his girlfriend, and so they were not a true family unit. And it was interesting. I mean, there were comparisons of different types of people. This is another scene that
Yeah.
again I felt was very odd, but it talked. This is when again I felt like he's just trying to pop the bubble on the male ego and just show what men feel like when they get deflated. And it's very, this film to me was very psychological. I wish I knew about more about psychology and the male ego, because I don't have the words or the vocabulary to really discuss it, but it just, it shows how, in a way, how fragile men are. In some ways, how we can be deflated. A woman can come up and say, "Oh, you're so cute and beautiful. My friend thinks you're just gorgeous. We were looking at you." And then she comes back and says, "No, oh, it wasn't you." And then they were like, "Yeah, great." And then like, "Wow." And they were like,
Yeah.
you know,
I
that
mean,
was,
what I didn't,
this
again,
film
this is
makes
one
you
of
feel
those,
awkward. There are so many awkward moments in this film that
yeah, this is what
were
was missing.
psychologically, it was like psychodrama. And
I get,
let me just finish. Psychodramas are painful to go through and they are not pleasant, but there's a reason why you go through them if you believe in psychodramas, because there's healing and there's understanding on the other side. And I think that's what his films are about. And I won't say this again, but his next film is this movie, maybe times 2 or 3. It's
okay.
it's it's more intense. So buckle your seatbelts if you watch that one.
I I I guess if we think about the purpose of the film being more of a, which I thought, again, like you, was a journey of the family, but it turned into a bit of an an ex not, I wouldn't say an exploration, but it turned into almost an accusation,
Yeah,
right? About the male ego,
yeah.
right? And if the point of the film became the accusation and the forced not the forced recognition, and then acceptance, like a journey for the male ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that was it, that's the purpose of this film, with the identity of the family being kind of a secondary or tangential kind of element.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can see the point of some of these scenes, but if the family is a central element and the identity of the individuals in the family is a central element, they spent a lot of time on the dad, and
Oh
they
yeah.
did things that were not necessarily, well, not necessary, I feel. And this is one of those scenes. Yes, it was awkward, and yes, it was a little painful, but would a woman who made a mistake like that truly come back to the person she just made the mistake with and say, "No, I'm sorry, I was wrong. It wasn't you she was pointing to. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." That would just make someone feel terrible. Why would they do that? Unless it's a commentary about women. I mean, what is this? What is the purpose behind that? And I don't truly believe that a woman who makes that mistake would come back. And then the girl who was supposed to have said the cute thing came back and said, "No, I'm sorry, it wasn't me. I didn't mean you. You're ugly as shit."
I do not want to turn this into a woman haters club,
Yeah,
but at the same time, either that woman was oblivious
yeah,
or and rude in some way, socially inappropriate, or she was just out to pop men's bubbles. You know what I mean? To go around.
yeah.
Uh,
Which is what the friend asked, right? In
what did
that
he say?
scene, he
I
said,
forgot.
what he said something like, um, what are you on for? What are you on? What are you, are you putting us on or something like that? And he
Yeah.
got up to be a little bit aggressive. And then two other men approached them.
Oh, I don't recall that.
Oh, yeah. This scene had the woman approached, the guy screamed ego boost. The one came back. The friend got a little bit pissy and said, are you having us on? What are you doing? What are you trying to do here? And he gets up to confront them, and then two other men from nowhere come into the space. They're completely faceless. They have no identities. They just confront the two men. And I don't know what it was being said, but it seemed like it was a confrontation. It seemed like it
Oh
was.
yeah, yeah. And they had to go, whoa, 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 it's cool,
Yeah, yeah,
go
yeah,
away.
yeah,
And
yeah.
he had to put his
Exactly.
arm up and kind of hold him
Yeah.
back a bit.
And after which they laughed because of the oddity of that situation.
Yeah. I forgot what that conflict, how it arose, but yeah, there was that happened as well. This film, you've seen the comedy series Faulty Towers with John Cleese.
Yeah.
What I heard about the writing of that was that John Cleese and the writer, and I don't know if it was his wife that wrote that with him. I think it may have been. I think she may have been one of the writers, but they sat around thinking, how can we tear this main character, John Cleese's character, whose name I can't remember, Faulty, right? Mr. Faulty, was that his name?
I can
Faulty?
remember.
Anyway, they said, how can we tear this character apart? What can we do to give him a nervous breakdown in every episode? And they basically made a list, and they just tried to tear his whole person apart. And we found it was a comedy, so we find it funny. It's hysterical. But it's almost like this film in a way too. I can almost see the director writing awkward moments down, saying, "Oh yeah, this has to happen. This has to happen," and just not shying away from those moments, those kind of unsettling psychological moments in our lives, but focusing on them. One thing we didn't talk about, and I'll let you respond, is that the film title is called Force Majeure, which is a legal term, and I looked it up. And I didn't know that term. It's when an extraordinary event occurs and it frees both parties from liability or obligation. So it's almost like when some significant, unexpected, extraordinary event happens, it's almost like a contract deal breaker. In legal terms, it means that the liability or obligations that you once had are now dissolved or changed. And that's the title of the film, which makes a lot of sense. It's like the obligation to him as a father, and his obligation as a parent and a husband have kind of changed because of this extraordinary event.
Right.
And so I think they were finding other events perhaps to layer on to. This wasn't an avalanche, but it was another event that affected them. What did you make of that idea? I forgot where I was before. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
That's all right. I think the major I think the people that are experiencing the conflict or the crisis is the mother and father.
Yeah.
And that I think that's central, right? And individually, the mother and father are both dealing with who their identity is, but as a couple. Then there's that's the most intimate of the relationships, right? And then because you see that at the beginning of the film, they're a family, but then you see the relationship between the mother and father become more central, and what they're struggling with individually, and the impact it's having on the family, right? So and then the observers and the people that come in, and how the dad escapes from the conflict by spending time with his son, right, when the couple was there, and how the children are used as kind of like pieces. Mom doesn't want to spend time with the family one day. Dad gets freedom from spending time with the family on another day. Individually, they have to go through their and process and decide and all that. So I think the force majeure is about how the man and the woman have to decide whether they're staying together, and as a result keeping the family together. And the kids even articulate that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. The son articulates that, which is their whole anxiety, and why they're crying and upset in some of these mom and dad conversation scenes in these cutaways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the force, the force is the avalanche. That's the catalyst. But the real force is reconciling who you are
Mm-hmm.
on the inside, your identity, and what may shock you and what may, make you embarrassed, and all these things that are inside.
Mm-hmm.
And both the man and the woman both have to wrestle with those in their different conversations with the people that they're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
I think you're right. I mean, I think that to me speaks to the fact that Swedish film is very psychologically driven. And I see this parallels with Bergman and the psychology that plays out in his films is very, very deep. Maybe it's a Swedish characteristic, a very introspective Swedish thing. I don't know. I mean, maybe I shouldn't pigeonhole it that way, but
have you ever seen the film with William Dafoe called The Lighthouse?
no, I haven't.
It's William Dafoe and Pedersen.
I'll look at it.
But both of them are American actors. I think it's an American director. It's shot in black and white, and it's a relationship psychological story as well that
Mm-hmm.
might be interesting to explore.
Mm-hmm.
But this film is really it is just a beautifully shot film
Mm-hmm.
with some of the moments, like, so we get the avalanche, we get the collapse, and then sometimes you see these little shots in the film about light and snow, right? And I remember they have a couple of shots of this fast moving skidoo shooting up the slope, and then slower kind of plows coming up behind, right? And there's this music that plays. Sometimes it's very fast and energetic, contrasting some of the more mundane tasks and things that are going on, right? And it reminded me of that kind of parallel kind of existence that I think the mother and the father are experiencing. They have their role as spouse, and they have their role as parent, but they have they're also their role as individuals, their identities unto themselves. And that's what's happening in this film. It's being threatened. Those different identities, those different roles are being threatened by an act that occurs because of that avalanche and the fallout from all of that.
The next scene that I have pictures of is it's hard to see, but
Yeah,
it's that was a scene that I don't know, it was how it really related, but it was a male energy scene. And it started and the men were screaming and in some kind of sauna, and they were all shouting, and there was kind of techno music or something like that, I think, happening. And this is just before that, where he's out by himself. He's lost his family, has kind of abandoned him. He can't get back into his room, and he's like out in the hallway. And then all of a sudden, this big crowd of guys runs towards him, and they're all screaming, and they're running out in the snow. I think they're heading towards the sauna, and he gets swept up in this kind of like male energy thing, this jock male energy thing, where they're going to go out and scream in the snow together and whatever they're doing. And
it was like whatever they're doing.
Yeah, it was a bit like, what? But it was, I don't know, it was maybe a different type of man that, as opposed to this guy. It was just sort of this, I want to say, one-dimensional guy who wants to go out and scream with his bros out in the cold,
Right.
and drink beer and get drunk and scream, which was kind of this it's not where this main character was at right then. But you do see him in there with the other guys screaming
At first.
for a bit, but it doesn't seem like he hung out there that long.
Right.
And he never really even takes off his jacket. All the other guys are shirtless, and you see him for a split second in his jacket, which was kind of interesting.
Because one of the things I thought was interesting about this segment of the film was he's lost. He can't find the kids. He can't find his wife. He doesn't know where they are. He's wandering from place to place.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're an anchor, and without them, he's rudderless. He doesn't know where to go. He doesn't know what to do. He's hunting for them. He's looking for them. He wants them. Maybe it's a psychological hint that this is something that he wants. But then it's juxtaposed with this image, which is of young, virile, men who are screaming and shouting and half naked, and maybe it's meant to be more animalistic and more juvenile, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's meant to be more like unencumbered, and it's maybe it's the choice, maybe it's the psychological moment where he's being given the direction that he can be taking. Right?
If he did experience a catharsis,
he did
in that moment. You don't really see it. I didn't see it on the screen because maybe he did, because that's the next. Finally, when he gets back with his wife,
that's the catharsis.
That's the cathartic scene, is when he's in the hallway, and then he's finally able to basically speak truth.
She accuses him of not having. Initially, he's faking the tears, right?
Right.
Initially, he's acting out the part, but then he just has this break. He just lets himself feel it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And then he even admits he had an affair, and he says he's bad, but he just lets the truth out. And following this scene, this kind of moment where he speaks the truth to his wife, and he's agonized there, that's when he comes back into the house and starts to cry. And his kids come out, and they're like, "What's wrong with Dad?" And the daughter kind of lays on top of him, and the mother doesn't know how to react. And the son finally tries to console him, and the mother again doesn't know how to react. And finally, the daughter brings the mother down back into the family unit and they're sort of bonded again.
Mm.
That's how I felt the resolution. This was sort of the resolution of the film for me.
Yeah, it's like the Force. It's like they were living separate. They were living together, but in parallel
Yeah.
before the vacation. They came to vacation. The 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 cataclysmic moment, right?
Yeah.
Where almost the near death at one point. That's how it could be described, right?
Yeah.
And then the fog of the avalanche fades, and everything goes back to being blue, and they could have just carried on with the life as before, but
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't get past the tearing of some of those beliefs in each other that they had,
Yeah.
right? It was
It's sort of,
undermined.
yeah, this whole crisis opens, to me, it feels like it opens up their whole family relationship to a wider, more honest and truthful place. To
Well, and
me,
like,
it was, even though the whole thing was this, crisis, it does, this psychodrama does take them to a better place in the end.
dad wanted something outside of the family, right?
Yeah.
To define who he was, to help him remember, whatever that he's seeking.
Mm-hmm.
Mom's conversation with the woman is about, exploring possible relationships beyond the family, right? And beyond the husband. And it's like they're redefining or recommitting themselves to being partners and mom and dad and the family.
Yeah.
And we don't see what happens after this. We don't see if they fall back into old habits,
Yeah.
right? We just
Well,
see them.
there was
Well,
one or two other telling scenes
yeah.
that I thought were, I put in, I grabbed some of the highlights that I thought were important. Is this scene, which again, I felt, I didn't know if it was real or a put on, but they went out skiing together as a family the next day. I think it was their
in
last day on the hills,
in a very foggy,
very
cloudy scenario.
foggy. And the mother gets lost and gets separated from the kids and the
Right.
dad. And he says, stay here. And he goes off and he finds her and brings her back. And the family is reunited. And it was sort of, and I didn't know if the wife and husband were doing this as a put on or if it was real. Because at the end, when they finally get back together, the wife goes, okay, I'm back. Bye. I'm going to walk away. And then she just walks away again, like it wasn't any big deal.
To go get her skis and stuff.
Yeah, but it just felt kind of like maybe they just did it to have this moment, or maybe again, it was the wife helping to mend his wounded male ego, sort of allowing him to be the rescuer, to I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it just
Well,
felt like this moment where it was maybe a bit of a put on that she wasn't really lost. It was something they had sort of planned out for the benefit of the kids.
or she needed him to rescue her,
Mm,
to, symbolically, right?
yes.
To come to her, to get her.
Yes.
Or he needed to, maybe it's not one way or the other, maybe it's both. He
Yeah.
needed to be the hero, and
Right.
she needed him to be the hero, as
Right.
a way to commit.
Yeah.
And they both together go to the kids.
Yeah. That's when I felt like this wasn't a feminist, strictly a feminist film that
Mhm.
was male bashing. It was like, okay, they see a balance here, which I felt was nice. And then the final scene, I know we've been talking for a bit, is the bus scene. And there's this crazy bus driver that can't make turns, and everyone's sitting back. Who's going to take charge? Surprisingly, it was the wife who felt empowered enough to go up and tell the bus driver, hey, we're getting off this bus. And she leads this mass exodus of people off the bus in the middle of nowhere,
Right.
just so they don't die, where most people would have just sat through it going, oh my God, are we going to die? But she stood up and said, no, I won't take this anymore. What do you reckon the symbolism was of the bus? So there has to be some,
So
I still haven't wrapped my head around it, but
there's one scene just after they come down the hill where they're actually leaving the hotel, and it's this. If it was an American film, it would be the hero's walk.
was
So
that
they're
after
leaving
the
the
bus? Was that
no, it was before the bus.
before the bus? Okay.
So they come down the hill, they're leaving the hotel, it's getting on the bus moment, right? But you can see them walk around a corner, and they're carrying their luggage, and they're wheeling their luggage behind them, and they're walking down. The daughter's on one side, the son's on the other, dad and mom in the middle, right? And they're just looking like they're striding with a purpose into the next phase of their lives. They've heroically overcome this obstacle, this challenge on the mountain.
Yes.
And then comes the bus scene.
Right.
So
Another
it's like,
challenge.
yeah, it's almost like the end of the trauma on the mountain is when they're leaving the hotel, and they've committed, and they're now, boom, they're on the bus, and they're going down these windy roads, hinting that life goes on, and there's these twists and these turns, and sometimes it's going to be smooth and sometimes it's not. And I took this to mean that it's precarious, right? Whatever they've committed to each other isn't a smooth, flat road off into the sunset, but it's implying to me that there's more stuff that comes, right? There's more stuff that they're going to be facing, these more obstacles, these more twists and turns.
And the wife is so strong in this scene, and so she advocates for herself, her family, and everyone on the bus in such a forceful way that it seems like she's gained something from that previous experience and now has this newfound power to sort of, take charge of a situation.
But you notice she says, I have to get off the bus. I have to leave the bus. I want off the bus. And she gets off the bus.
Then
The
people follow.
The kids and the husband are still on the bus.
Oh,
And
I
everyone
didn't. Okay.
follows.
That's interesting.
Right.
So
it's a parallel of the original crisis.
Exactly. It is a parallel where the husband ran away from the avalanche fearing for himself. She did the same thing here, but with a different kind of, crisis point.
So I wonder if it's about, and the scene afterwards, right? They get off the bus and panic ensues, but the friend gets up and says, calm down, everybody. We're going to do this organized.
Yeah.
Right? He's stepping up to be the hero here, and everyone gets off the bus except the woman who was, that we already mentioned,
The floozy.
and then they walk.
Yeah.
Right?
I've got a few. We're getting close to the last few shots here. They
They
walk.
even called the bus the racing. He's something about him racing down these roads.
Yeah.
Right. And the bus gets stuck and doesn't know how to turn and can't navigate the twists and turns. But there's symbolism in them being off the bus and walking the road, taking the slower path, hand in hand.
Yeah.
Right. There's symbolism in that.
What I felt was interesting is that in the aftermath of the bus, and this is the final shots of the film, the dad asks this other man for a cigarette and starts smoking. And the son goes, "Do you smoke, Dad? Do you smoke?" Yeah. And he goes, yes, I do. And it was something he had never revealed to his son before. And it was a bit of a leveling moment where he's like, this is the truth of who I am. I'm not going to hide who I am. I might cry. I might smoke sometimes. I'm a person. And this is who I am, And that was kind of a powerful moment, I felt, where they were all walking.
And I liked how from a visual standpoint, right? Just if I'm looking at this picture and I'm seeing the kind of like the distancing between characters. The girlfriend on the far side, who's, you know, of the guy in the beard
Yeah.
carrying the girl.
Yeah.
He is a divorced dad who's got kids, who's with the mom, right? But here he's happy to carry the girl down the road, like the little girl. The dad has got his kid, the mother's there as well, but that's one unit. And then the girlfriend is off to the side a little bit, right? Not quite connected to the main group or to her boyfriend. And then everybody else is kind of spread out and going on the same journey, right? Different
Yeah.
ties, different walks. They're all trudging down this road together,
This
right?
was, to me, it was kind of I mean, I felt the film was psychological strictly, but at this moment, it felt very political. It felt like the people saying, no, we're getting off the bus and we're going to find our own way down the hill. Thank you very much, bus driver. But
Mm,
we're not going to be part of your confined mode of transportation anymore. We're going to find our own way because the people can unite. It was a very political film.
take the
What I
journey in our own pace.
Yes, the I was reading about the director again in closing. His most recent film, if I don't have I got the title right, but I think it's called The Triangle of Sadness. I think that's what it's called, or The
Oh,
Triangle of Pain. I think
he's a
it's
real
Triangle of
chipper
Sadness.
guy.
Yeah, he's a cheery fellow. But this new film, Woody Harrelson is in it, and
Mm,
he has a couple of other American actors. In his second film, he has a couple of American actors in it too. Actually, one's Irish and one's American. But they're kind of co-stars. But in the newest film he's making, Woody Harrelson plays a Marxist sea captain, which already is politically loaded, politically charged.
mm.
And I've just seen some stills or some shots of Woody Harrelson and the director talking. The film has not been released. I think it's totally done, but it's yet to be released kind of because of the pandemic. It had been delayed. But I think his next film is really going to be a much more of a political statement. It seems like
Yeah.
interesting.
Have you, you know, we were talking about these kind of Scandinavian films. We've taken a look at this kind of style. Have you ever seen Three Billboards?
Outside of, yeah, it's
Oh,
Three
it's a
Billboards.
movie.
Yeah, I do. I have seen that movie,
And have you
but
seen Nomadland?
I have seen Nomadland. They were directed by the same person, but they starred the same woman, didn't they?
Yeah. And
Frances McDormand.
they remind me, as we are talking about it,
Mhm.
they remind me of this kind of film,
Yeah.
where it's about life and about the mundane of life and about the journey everyone's on,
Mhm.
right? Um, it's not, those are acclaimed movies,
Yeah.
but they're not successful movies in the traditional American kind of sense. So those might be interesting films to kind of explore. They're coincidentally also cinematographically cinema from a cinematographic standpoint, right?
Yeah.
How they're shot, they're
Mhm.
beautiful.
Yeah, they are. They're beautiful.
The cinematography is gorgeous.
Thematically, there's another film I have to mention because this is when the film really, for me, became big, a big symbolism moment of kind of culture and society. There's a film called Swept Away by
Mm,
Lina Wertmuller. She's an Italian director, Lina Wertmuller.
okay.
I think she's Italian or maybe she's German, but I think it's an Italian production. Amazing film. They did a remake with Madonna, which was terrible. But the original it's about a woman on a yacht and one of the crew, and somehow they get lost at Swept Away. They go off on
Mm,
a small little boat from the main yacht,
mm,
and they get lost and they get stranded on a little desert island together. And the woman who's in charge, she's sort of like the well-to-do upper crust, and this guy's like the working class. It's a class structure thing.
right.
The roles reverse, and they kind of meet as people. It's a very interesting, in a way, political film, but an intimate political film. And that's a good one to take a look at. Swept Away, the original with Lena, directed by Lena Wertmuller. It's,
Mm.
I believe, an Italian production, all with subtitles, but it's a film I saw years ago, and it sticks with you. To me, it's a great film. I haven't seen it in years, but it reminded me.
Well, something to look into.
Yeah. Hey, this has been a great discussion. We went on a
It
bit
has been.
longer. Um,
I like that we went from the cinematographer in the last one we saw, right?
mhm.
To then that's the same cinematographer that shot this, correct?
I don't know. That's a
Well,
good question. I don't believe so.
I
No,
think
no.
I think we were talking about cinematography and the way it was shot
Mhm.
in the last talk we had
Yes.
about what
The
was that?
Vast of Night.
Vast of Night, Vast
Yeah.
of Night. That led to this one,
Yeah.
right? So I like how there's always a thread to what it is we're not just picking randomly. It seems like there's something that's leading us into the next piece,
Yeah.
the next movie. So yeah, maybe it's directing, maybe it's one of these other,
Cinematography. Yeah.
again, right?
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah,
great talk, Brad.
great talk as well, Robert.
Let me
Good to
stop
see you.
recording. I'll stop recording. We'll have a debrief for 1 minute.
Cheers.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Wait, how do I stop this thing?